I really consider her to be one of the real authorities when it comes to how to deal with emerging artists and emerging art markets. So any questions that you have about how to price your work, how to think about the marketplace, she's the go-to gal. She's been the director of galleries like La Luz de Jesus. She had her own gallery, Sloan Fine Art, for many years. She's really respected in the industry, and you shouldn't hesitate to ask any questions. This is the time to get an insider's point of view.
And I'm pretty nice too.
And she's
so don't be
really
shy.
nice. That's the other part. She doesn't have a mean bone in her body, except for other mean people.
I was going to say, yeah.
So anyways, welcome Alex Sloan.
Thank you, Peter. Hi, everybody. So thank you for having me, and nice to meet you all. So as Peter said, I had a storefront on the Lower East Side of New York City, diagonal from Schiller's. It's now a nail salon, which I closed a few years ago, and I've been doing pop-up shows and that kind of stuff since. And I took that opportunity also to take all of the questions, every question I could think of that artists had asked me, and every piece of advice I wish I could give artists, and I put it all together into a book called Launching Your Art Career. And that was a really great experience because I had the opportunity to reach out to many of my friends and colleagues, Peter included, Jean-Pierre Roy, who also teaches here, is in the book, and got a lot of great feedback from them on advice they would give. So I've done this particular lecture at the Academy several times. Hi, David.
Hi,
good, thank you. And I've updated it with some new and fresh knowledge I have, so I'm really hoping it's super helpful for you guys. At the end, we're going to do a little pricing exercise, which can be a little bit awkward because I'm going to ask you to bring work up, and I'm going to ask you to tell me what you think it should sell for, and then we'll talk about it. But don't be shy, I promise I'll be nice. So if you want to find me, alexsloan.com, I also have sloanfineart.com, there's Twitter, there's Facebook, all that other stuff, feel free to friend and all that other good stuff. So before we get started, I have come to the conclusion that there are sort of 4 things that and when I say young artists, I mean artists who are getting started. I realize we're not all starting when we're out of high school. So 4 things that young artists can do or know when they're hitting the ground running that are going to be super, super helpful. One of which is pricing, but I just can't resist. As long as I have your attention, I'm going to go ahead and give you some unasked for advice. The first thing I really would encourage you guys to do is realize it is a really big art world out there. There are all sorts of different types of galleries. There's all sorts of things going on. There's the grant track, there's the residency track, there's more commercial galleries, there's all sorts of stuff going on. And I think sometimes artists get out of school, particularly in New York, where you're really immersed in what I think is the best art city in the United States. And you have this idea in your head like, oh, this is the track I'm supposed to be on. So one thing I would like to encourage you guys to do is really think about your life and think about what you want from your life. Think about what matters to you. If you want to have a family, you don't have one yet, but you value travel, apply to a bunch of residencies while you can. If you really, really care about selling artwork, then maybe, look at galleries that are going to be doing a higher volume of sales, but maybe aren't quite so cool and edgy. You know what I'm trying to say? Just open your minds to the fact that it's not just Chelsea and the Lower East Side, it's not just New York, there's a whole world out there. Another thing, and then just keep your goals in mind. You can change your mind. You can change your mind as you go, but if you always know what you're thinking about, and what you're looking for, and what you want, it'll help you make good decisions. The second thing is, and I cannot say this enough, you guys, community is the #1 thing that is going to make all the difference in your career. If you stick together, people that you meet in school, other people you know, people you meet as you go, we're super lucky right now. We've got the internet and all sorts of ways to reach out to people and meet people. I know there are some people here in the audience that I'm Facebook friends with even. If you go to other people's openings, if you are invited to be in a show that for some reason you can't do, but you know a friend who would be perfect for, and it feels appropriate and you can recommend them, be generous with each other, keep those relationships open. I personally am not like a big goer-outer. I don't love to go out all the time, but you know what? If a friend has an opening, I always go because it matters. You want people to be there for you. You want to be there for them. It really helps to build goodwill, and over time, you will be so surprised by the opportunities that come your way because you stay top of mind. Oh wait, Sue, she always comes to my openings. And so someone will remember you, whereas you otherwise might fall off the radar. Also, if you end up dispersing after school, some of you will stay in New York, some of you will move on, just stay in touch. I've seen so many opportunities come up for artists because they stayed in touch. The other thing I think that is really important is staying curious about what's going on. Following blogs, following any listings where opportunities are being listed, things you could submit to. Stay up on what's going on because it's really easy to fall behind and miss opportunities that way. The third is to be prepared. That sounds really dumb. But I've been invited to do studio visits with people that I meet. A friend of a friend introduces me, we hit it off. I go to do a studio visit, they've got 2 paintings. Don't invite someone to do a studio visit unless you actually have the paintings. And how do you have the paintings? You have a good studio practice. Make work, make work, make work. Make sure you've got, your website doesn't have to be the most robust thing in the world, but you've got something online. Be prepared for every opportunity. If you meet somebody out somewhere, have a business card. Those are the kinds of things that, it's easy to be like, oh, my website's so out of date. Update it. Sit in front of the TV one night or whatever you're doing, take a little bit of time out of your studio practice and make sure you keep your materials up to date and you're prepared for any opportunity that presents itself. And then the reason we're here is pricing. The other thing I think that I would say a common mistake young artists make is just pricing mistakes. And those are things like pricing too high coming right out of the gate, raising the prices too quickly, selling things different prices at a studio or in a gallery, being inconsistent with their prices. So what we're going to do now, after I've given you some basic tidbits, is to dig a little deeper into pricing. So this is a bummer, and I know it, but it's a business. It just is. Like if you want to be a working artist and you want to participate in the gallery system, it's a business. The gallery needs to pay its rent. And by agreeing to participate in that system, you are accepting the fact that your artwork is a commodity to some degree. And it is going to be selling, and being too emotionally attached, I think, can be really, really difficult for the artist. And I know this is an insane thing to say because you pour all of your love into your work and you care so much about your work, but when that work is done and it's going to the gallery, it sadly, to some degree, is a product. A beautiful, wonderful product from your heart, but a product. So try with every fiber of your being, first and foremost, to accept the fact that if you price it too expensive, it's not going to sell. If it doesn't sell, the gallery is not getting help paying their rent. If they're not getting help paying their rent, they're not going to invite you back. It's a relationship. Also, one thing I really believe so strongly is your work does nothing for you sitting in racks in your studio. I mean, if you have a studio visit and it's current work you want to show someone, that's one thing, but so many artists, well, I don't want to part with it for less than such and such because I spent so many hours and it's the best thing I've ever done. Well, guess what? Next month, there'll be a new best thing you ever did. And you'll be sitting on that piece in your studio, in the racks, and it's doing nothing for you. Getting your work out there, getting it into people's offices, getting into people's homes. I cannot tell you how many phone calls I've gotten. I have a client who's an agent at CAA. I was in so-and-so's office and I saw this awesome painting, and I don't remember the artist's name, but it looked like this, that, the other. And then ta-da, sell a painting. Call the artist, what do you got? We sell a painting. So it's really important to get your work out there where it's working for you. Comparing yourself to other people. I see a lot of that, like, well, my friend Joe's getting these prices. That can be helpful to a certain degree, like you're all just getting out of school and maybe you feel like there's some similarity there, but everybody's on a different trajectory. So I do recommend looking around, particularly if you're in a group show and you're struggling. Kind of, you can look around with prices, look around and see what other people are pricing their work at, but don't get hung up on competing with friends. I think that can really mess with your head and lead to bad decisions. This is just a sidebar. I have noticed that prices for emerging artists tend to be lower outside of New York. If you finish school and you start showing immediately in New York, that's one thing. But if you go back to Memphis, or you go back to Sacramento, or you go back to wherever you're from, or you find yourself included in a show, and it's sort of your first chance to price your work, keep in mind that many of those cities are not functioning at New York prices. It's like rent, like they're not paying the same amount for rent. You can't price your work differently in a New York show and an Atlanta show, but if you're just coming up through a different market, keep that in mind. Then this is my mean and nasty thing. The only mean and nasty thing I will say. If you want to get paid by the hour, paint houses. It does not matter how much time you spend. And if that's heartbreaking, and it sucks, particularly in a group like this where you guys are really honing your craft and putting so much time into your work. But in the grand scheme of things, it does not matter. So you gotta let go of that. And I have a fabulous example of that coming up, which I think you'll enjoy. Also, the amount of detail really only matters like within your own body of work and not very much. I have another example of that coming up, but you can't really be like, well, I spent so much less time, or this is really different. You have to keep some consistency in your pricing. Now let's talk about galleries. So the perfect situation is, you're working with a gallery, they're super cool, you have a good relationship, you feel comfortable asking them questions, you find them helpful, you sell your work, they invite you to show again, it turns into a wonderful relationship. Ultimately though, it is your career, it is your work, it is ultimately your decision. Something I saw happen like 2005-ish. We went through this huge boom where everything was selling, and you could sell like a stick with a string on it. It was ridiculous. Everybody was just like, oh my God, oh my God. And I saw a lot of dealers jack up the prices of their artists' work. A lot, like doubling. Everybody just getting super greedy. And then the economy crashed in 2008. And I saw a lot of artists whose prices were at a certain point, and you cannot lower your prices, you guys. You can raise them, but you can't lower them. So I watched dozens, not exaggerating, of incredibly talented, sincere, awesome artists looking at their situation saying, I don't know what to do. Like, I can't sell my work. And if they had not raised their prices so quickly, there would still be people who had been buying before who maybe would continue to buy. So that's another thing, like work with the gallery, get advice from them, but don't let yourself get bullied, ever. And don't ever drop something off for a group show and say, just price it whatever you think. Because you may be really surprised. And it's just ask them. Ask them for a little bit of help, ask them what other people are pricing their work at. But don't ever let that decision be taken out of your hands. Even if you're represented by a gallery, it's a long-term relationship, you really trust them, just don't give that power over. It's not in your best interest. Have a conversation. And that's something I always tell artists is life is a relationship. It's a relationship with your teachers, it's a relationship with your friends, it's a relationship with your significant other. It's a relationship with your galleries. So if every relationship is going to be different, you may feel intimidated, you may feel comfortable, but you need to participate in that relationship. You need to let them know if you have questions, because you've got one of them and they've got a bunch of you. So, you may not be top of mind. You want to make sure that you're communicating with them. Catching up with myself. This is particularly horrible for sculptors. The cost of your production cannot really be factored into your work. So if you decide to do a beautiful work on paper and you go out and you frame it in a big, elaborate, expensive frame, that is your decision. You cannot price that piece more expensive because you want to recoup your frame costs. That's your decision. Also, if you're doing sculpture and your materials are costly, sculpture tends to sell more expensive when materials are more costly, but you can't suddenly decide, like, I'm going to do this piece in all gold leaf, so I'm going to charge 4 times what I normally charge. You just can't do that. And I think that I have found has been a big surprise for a lot of artists. One thing is about discounts I want to tell you guys about. I have found that people who are sophisticated buyers that buy art will generally ask for a discount. Depending on the situation, the gallery will or will not give them a discount. 10% is pretty standard. 20% happens sometimes. In a situation like that, depending on how you feel, depending on your comfort level with the gallery, I always just tell people right off the bat, my policy is I can discount up to 20% at my discretion without having to check with you. And if you don't feel comfortable that I will make a good decision, like it's a really good, and I never offer a discount, God knows. But if we're in a situation where shows come down and a really wonderful collector was out of town, or these are the kind of decisions that a dealer makes, there's nothing wrong with asking a dealer, what's your discount policy? Just so you know what to expect. But don't be alarmed by the fact that discounts do happen. So going out in the world, discounts are a fact of life. And I think you guys do open studios, and people probably come in and they're trying to negotiate with you. So you're getting the hang of that ahead of time. So those are just some sort of general things to keep in mind. Some more specific tips that I would like to share with you. I'm a firm believer in building your prices. Like I said, you cannot go down. You cannot lower your prices. Discounts can be helpful in a situation, maybe your prices got a little too high. You can authorize the the gallery to do a little bit more of a discount, but your prices are what they are. So you're much, much better off starting lower and just building your prices from there. And the best thing in the world for you, the best thing in the world is to be invited to be in a group show and have your piece sell. Because you will stick in the mind of that dealer and you will be on their radar for the next show. And the even better thing you can do is have a solo show and have all or most of your work sell and look back and go, damn, I probably could have charged more. You know what? Everyone's looking. Everyone's looking at those dots. You are a star if you have a lot of red dots and you are on people's radar and they're aware. The work can be gorgeous and spectacular and wonderful, but I'm telling you, those red dots, they make a difference. They will create opportunities for you. So I really encourage you, if you're sort of like, should I put this at 1,000 or 1,200? In the grand scheme of things, it's a $100 difference to you if it sells on a 50-50 split. So go ahead and give yourself wiggle room to raise those prices. So I always say start as low as you can without wanting to die if somebody actually buys the piece. Your work, like I said, it doesn't do you a whole lot of good back in your studio unless you have a studio visit and it's a piece you really want to show. It doesn't do you a lot of good. So again, pricing, starting at reasonable prices and getting the work out there. Your work is out there working for you. It's not gathering dust. I also really encourage you guys to trade. I really, really, really encourage you to trade art with each other. You have no idea where you're all going. You could, if you've got a friend and they like your work and you like their work, trade. If it's just sitting in your studio, you'll build a wonderful collection that you'll love and you'll get to enjoy for the rest of your life. Your work will be in somebody else's home, and you never know. It could end up being worth something down the line. So I think trading's a great thing to do also, just to get your work out there, and you've actually got something to trade. One of the things that I'm talking about artists coming out of the gate with their prices too high. I've definitely noticed, there's the art school stars. Oh my gosh, they're selling so much at the open studios, and everybody loves them, and they're the darling. And then they get out in the art world, they raise their prices, or they price too high. They get out in the world, nobody cares. There's a million kids who are or people who were the star of their school. Don't get caught up in how fabulous you feel here, because it's awesome. But you're gonna get out there and there's gonna be a way bigger pool. And you just never know, tides turn. I really, again, encourage you. It's a little bit of a false economy getting caught up in, well, I'm doing so well in school, I'm gonna go out in the world and they're gonna be beating my door down. If they beat your door down, great, you can raise your prices later. I did just talk a little bit about, I got ahead of myself a little bit, keeping in mind the economy. When times are good, it's tempting to really go crazy with prices, but everything evens out. And also your collector base. This is a really smart thing I've noticed some artists do. They build a loyal collector base, and those people have friends, and they get a bunch of people excited about their work. And then, okay, I can raise my prices now because everything I'm making is selling. But if you raise them too high, all those people who got excited here can't get there. So you lose all those supporters who were really excited and enthused, and you alienate them. So by doing, a 10% increase, a 20% increase, my general philosophy is if all or most of what you're making sells, between one solo show and the next solo show, 10%. If you're blowing up, 20%. Also, it kind of depends on where you're at. When your prices are still a little bit lower, 20% doesn't feel like quite so much. When they start to get higher, it starts to feel like a little bit more. But really, appreciate those collectors who have supported you, and don't just be like, oh, we're too awesome for you now, and sorry you'll never be able to buy anything again, and you never got to have one, or your sister really wants one, but now she can't afford one. Keep engaging them, because another thing I've noticed is, when I worked with all those days, is many years ago, I sold prints to people back then who now buy original art from me because they grew up as I grew up. And they were always felt engaged. And as they started to make more money and their tastes evolved and their resources evolved, they are able to still buy stuff. So it's really great to build those relationships. Sorry, I just started wearing readers, so I'm like still trying to figure this whole thing out. Do I need them? Do I not need them? Oh, consistency of prices. Big no-no. If you are selling work out of your studio, it has to be priced at the same price it would be at a gallery. Big no-no is selling stuff cheaper out of the studio. At the very least, you have to say, if a comparable piece was $1,200 in a group show, that piece sold 6 months later, whatever, someone's in your studio, you got to at least come out and kind of like say to them $1,200. You can negotiate with them a little bit lower, and people do expect you to negotiate out of the studio, but you will alienate collectors and you will alienate your gallery if they find out that you're selling cheap out of your studio. And that's another, this brings up a little etiquette thing. If you are emailed by somebody and they say, hey, I saw your piece in a group show last month at X Gallery, what do you have in the studio? A super classy thing to do, if that gallery doesn't represent, you don't really know them that well, but you want to build a relationship with them, a super classy thing to do is to email that gallery and say, I was contacted by this person who saw my work at the gallery. I'm going to arrange a studio visit. Do they want to be there also? Or do they want to be cut in on that sale? That also helps to really build relationships. But some questions I've gotten are, oh, I'm in a show at a nonprofit and the split is 70-30 for the artist, so I'm getting more money, so should I make my piece cheaper? No. Just keep your prices consistent across the board. It's really important. So I'm going to get into a couple of examples. I know there's a lot of words on that, and I apologize for that, but this is one of my favorite artists to work with.
Can I ask you just one question?
Yeah.
You know that I agree with everything you said about that keeping your prices consistent and out of the studio, but it seemed like the reasoning was because you don't want to undercut the gallery, which I totally agree with. But if you don't have a gallery, you know, collectors and buyers are knowledgeable and sophisticated, and I think they know that normally if they bought this, 50% would be going to a gallery.
Yes.
That's not the case here. And I think it's fair, as long as you're not undercutting a
Absolutely.
gallery, then it's very fair to say, hey, this is not a gallery situation, and
That's
everyone should benefit.
A very, very good point. And the thing is, if you don't have a gallery, if you haven't shown in galleries yet, you don't really have established public prices yet. And so, thank you for bringing that up. You can say, you know, I haven't really shown it in a gallery yet, or, you know, this is going direct. You can have that conversation. But then once your prices get out more publicly is when you really need to worry about it. But yeah, if you're in a situation where you're a friend of a friend, refer someone to your studio, or you're having open studios, again, keep your prices consistent in the studio. You know, different mediums are going to have different prices. Editioned work is not going to be as expensive as originals, but keep those prices consistent. But yes, if you don't already have an established situation with the gallery, but again, that's just, I think of as starting lower.
Yeah, or it's just like, it's, in a way, it's like smart psychology, because you could say, okay, you know, in these group shows, this was this much, you're a great friend of...
But that's discounts.
Right, and I would like to offer you this, and then everybody wins.
Absolutely.
And it goes with your thing of just get it out there.
Yeah, and that is, in my mind, you're saying, this would be $1,200 in a studio, in a gallery, I'd like to offer you a courtesy discount as a friend because I'm not working with the gallery, whatever it is. And again, that's a great way to use that word discount, or to use that word courtesy, or friends and family, to get everybody where they want to be. Yeah. So Brad Woodfin has become a very good friend. So I'm super privy to his situation. He lives in Montreal, Canada. He went to a very, very sort of hippy-dippy liberal school, studied printmaking, and didn't really learn how to paint. And got out with a degree and realized, oh crap, I don't feel like I'm ready to put my work out there. So he got a day job, and he painted every night, every minute he had in his studio until he really, really felt like he was ready to show his work to people. And I encourage you to do that also. Really, I know there's this urge to like post things on Facebook and get your work out there and Instagram everything. But don't put your work out there unless it's really friggin' good and you feel really good about it and you feel like you are ready for it. There is nothing wrong with taking some time, taking an extra 6 months after school or whatever that looks like to make sure you're ready. So Brad didn't feel like he was ready. He finally felt like he was ready. He was living in Canada. He reached out to a gallery he loved in Vancouver, who was in fact, open to looking at submissions. They put him in a group show, which later led to a solo show. Through his commitment to maintaining community, he maintained a friendship with somebody he had known in the Pacific Northwest when he was in school. I did a group show called Plus Two, I think it was called, where I invited all my artists to invite 2 people to participate in the show, and it didn't matter. I did not screen it at all. Like whoever they picked was in. The only rule was it had to be a 10 by 10 inch piece because we didn't have a trim. So this artist I work with invited Brad. Okay, never seen the work before. Got it in the mail from Canada, opened it up. It was on time. It was ready to hang. It was gorgeous. He was pleasant, and it was just stunningly beautiful. Put it on the wall, could have sold it 5 times over. It was $650. That's one of the reasons I could have sold it 5 times over, because it was very affordable. It was also very, very beautiful. So what happened? I'm like, I got gold on it. I called him up. Hey, let's do a solo show together. His work at the time was very small, so we did a project room show at my gallery. So in that show, I have to check my notes, we had, so his first group show in the US was with me, $650, sold it, could have sold $1 million. So I gave him a solo show in New York. It was a project room show. He gave me all small works. We had 13 pieces. I sold all 13. And we kept the prices pretty cheap. We raised them a little bit, but we kept them pretty cheap. So, that's $16,000 retail. He walked away with $8,000. He was like, oh my God, I'm an artist. This is awesome, great. And gradually over time, I took him to some art fairs, and we would raise his prices little by little because we literally could not keep them in stock. And I even had a conversation with him, we might be able to go 20%. He was like, no, you know what? What's success to me and what's my goal is to make beautiful work that goes into people's homes that people love, people appreciate. And at some point in time, I can support myself as an artist, so I don't want to get greedy, which was awesome. He stopped me from getting greedy, which was great. And it's led to more opportunities because people came through the gallery. Whoa, this stuff's beautiful, or they saw it in art fair. It all sells. He's now showing in New York, he's now showing in San Francisco, Seattle. He's averaging about 1 solo show a year, and then a few commissions here and there, and group shows. He is now supporting himself as an artist. His dream has come true. And really his whole mentality was, I want to make good work, I want to get it out there at a reasonable price, I don't want to get greedy. And he's engaged a whole collector base, and now he's making bigger works, and bigger works are more expensive, and will continue to raise prices. He can't really, produce any more work to show because just labor reasons, time intensive. But he can certainly raise his prices. So that's an example of somebody who, over the course of not very many years, and these are small pieces, the examples I gave, like, in 2010, 1800, in 2012, 2000, 2014, 2200. But keep in mind, the works get big. So some of those works were going from being, $4,000 up to $6,000. It definitely adds up. And opportunities to show at bigger galleries with more wall space and more promotion. So he's an example of somebody I think has been really, really smart about it. And one of the interesting things about Brad is he lives in Montreal. He's not in New York where he can go to openings and network with people and meet people and hustle for himself. His success has come solely through making beautiful work, getting it out there, getting into people's homes. And he's actually the artist who somebody called me about having seen his work at CAA. And it's like, who knew? But we continue to sell work just from people seeing it and loving it. I'm gonna, with his permission, I use JP as an example. So Jean-Pierre Roy, one of your teachers, he graduated about 11 years ago. And I had this conversation with him. The earliest pricing he could remember was in a group show. It was a 12 by 24 inch piece. It was $1,200. It sold. Slowly over time, and you guys know JP, he gets out, he goes to everybody's opening, he shows up, he shows his face. You feel obligated to go to his stuff. He knows how to talk about art. He's really created a community for himself. He's created a network for himself. So when opportunities are there, and he's always prepared, although he does need to update his website, anytime an opportunity presents itself, JP is able to act on that opportunity. And that's something to think about for you guys when you're done with school is, you know, New York is really expensive, but even if you want to leave eventually, staying for a couple of years, there can be some benefit because you can build a lot of relationships that way. But you know, over the course of 11 years, JP's work has gotten a lot bigger. But 2014, he had a really, really great year. Beginning of 2015, it really, really started to blow up for him. I know you guys all heard Leonardo DiCaprio bought a piece off Instagram story. That got him a lot of press. He's working with a gallery that he has a great relationship with. And he's gotten some, you know, he was on the cover of High Fructose, he's on the Wall Street Journal, he's gotten some good press. So they went ahead and did a 16% increase this year. So he had 3 pieces at Pulse Miami just this last week. And they were, and again, I have his permission to disclose this, they were, 2 of them were $30,000, 1 of them was $10,000, they all sold. He is, in 11 years, and I understand the first piece is much smaller, but really, really made a robust career for himself. He is living as a working artist. He could ditch all you and only paint, but he doesn't want to, and support himself. So, you know, he's somebody to really look at as taking, you know, the talent and also the smarts. He's been really smart about not wanting to raise his prices. He was around when a lot of friends raised theirs too high. And then also engaging the community. And I'm going to use him as my example for hours spent. This is one of my favorite things. So, in 2007, JP painted the biggest painting to date that he had painted. And he decided, I'm going to keep track of hours. Turned out there were over 2,000 hours in the painting. It was priced at $25,000 retail. There was a discount, $22,000. He made $11,000. It came out to $5 an hour. $5 an hour. You could go work pretty much anywhere and get paid more than $5 an hour. But it was a beautiful splashy painting. Somebody loved it. It went in their home. And look, you know, you just can't take the hours into consideration. So here's an example that relates to detail. Yeah.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Previous slide. What would be the protocol, or has it ever happened where, like 52, 30K JP meeting,
Yeah.
if one of those clients were to know to ask about a discount and get that discounted buy, and retroactively the other buyer discovered that they would pay more, has that ever happened where someone then goes back and says, wait, this is the same size, how come they don't?
No, that's never happened to me. Really, when it comes to the actual selling of the art, it's a very sort of intimate exchange between the dealer and the collector. Chances are no one's ever really going to know. I have had somebody come to me and say, my boyfriend bought XYZ piece, and, you know, asking about, it's actually more than that. I've had sort of, my boyfriend bought a piece and I bought a piece and now this is our 3rd piece, you know, is there any wiggle room because we've been supportive? But I've never had anybody come back. I have had people complain that they bought work cheaper out of the studio. I've definitely had that happen. But no, I mean, at an art fair there's thousands of people coming through. And I didn't ask him, I don't know if there were any discounts. I think dealers don't like to give discounts. It's really more of an emerging artist kind of a thing, hopefully, in a perfect world. When the economy tanked, it was a nightmare. It was discounts everywhere. But that's corrected itself a little bit. And I don't know if there were any, but nobody should know if there are. So this is a really out-of-date example, but it's such a clear example, I like to use it. This is a local Brooklyn artist named Jonathan Viner. I did a show with him where there were some sort of, you know, more narrative paintings, and then there were some portraits. And the portraits were so much simpler that we really felt like we couldn't price the same price for the same size when you're looking at that. Like, it just doesn't make sense. We probably weren't going to sell the portraits. Whereas if the portraits were a little bit less, then people felt like, oh great, I can touch the magic, I can get one of those, I really like that, and it feels like a deal. So in a situation like this, where it is so clearly cut within the same body of work, that this is a very different thing with much, much less work, that's when you've got a little bit of wiggle room. But even so, you don't want to get too carried away with that. Then for, I don't know how many sculptors we have in here, but this is a pretty good example. There's an artist named Elizabeth McGrath I work with, and everything she was making was selling. We had a really, really successful show, solo show, and she was going to do a product review show. She called me and said, I've got this really great idea. I want to do a single sculpture in the middle of the room, nothing on the walls, super, you know, lit really brightly. I want to cover it with Swarovski crystals. I've sourced the crystals. It's going to cost me $5,000 to make the piece. So I was really glad she called me before she spent $5,000. And we sat down, we sort of talked about it, and talked about, okay, do we really feel like there are people who are going to buy this piece? And do we really feel like, what would the appropriate price be based on size and everything else? And the arrangement we came to, because I wasn't going to go out of pocket for her to pay for materials, but she was willing to do it as long as she felt like we had a conversation about that cost ahead of time. So what we ended up landing on was, we'll price it wherever we price it. We ended up pricing it $22,000. We did sell it. I paid her back the $5,000 off the top of the materials. And I was super happy to do it. I was super happy to sell the piece. I was happy to show the piece. It was all warm and fuzzy all the way around. But I knew going in that that was the expectation, and she knew going in that she was going to be able to recoup that. So that's just a case where, you know, if you've got a wild idea, something you want to do, and it costs money, I wouldn't say, unless you've got a really, really good relationship with a dealer, they're probably not going to go out of pocket to pay for it for you. But you can have a conversation about maybe skewing the prices. I mean, skewing the cut. Another thing is some galleries will price framed works on paper. Like, for instance, this piece would be $200, and the frame was $50. They'll price $250 and give you $50 back for the frame. Some will do that. But again, you want to have that conversation ahead of time. You just want to ask, how do you handle framing? And I know these things can sometimes be awkward, but I found if you're really, first of all, we don't mind questions, because then we don't have surprises at the end. So questions are actually a good thing. And as long as you're really nice about it and you're not like, well, I spent money on this and you should, as long as you're thinking like, okay, hey, how does this work? Like, what's the deal? People are happy to have a conversation about it. So one of the things I talk about in the book, which is a very old-fashioned approach, but something that I find can be incredibly valuable, is linear inch pricing. This only works for two-dimensional work. And basically, it is length plus width times a dollar amount equals how much your work is. So if most of your work is sort of in a similar range, you can say, like, my work is at about $25 a linear inch. And you can do the math on that, and you will be super shocked at how well it works out. It does not work for very, very small pieces or very, very large pieces. Very small pieces will be too expensive, and you have to tweak. Very, very large works will be too cheap, and you have to tweak. But everything in between, it works out really well for. So as an example, length plus width multiplied by the dollar amount equals the price. So for a 20 by 20 piece, at $10 per linear each, 20 plus 20 is 40 times 10 is $400. Okay, so taking that, I don't know why I changed the math, but I did. It only works for two-dimensional works, and obviously paintings and drawings might be priced differently. But, you know, pick a price that makes sense to your work and go backwards. That's why I always encourage people to think about doing, like, okay, this piece I feel really, really comfortable. It's 20 by 24, and it feels like an $800 piece. All right, so divide 800 by 44, because that's 20 plus 24, you get $18.18 a linear inch. Okay, so my price is probably around $18 a linear inch. And I'm going to give you an example in the next one. Okay, if you apply that to pieces in different sizes, you'll see. So 24 by 36, 1080, I'd probably make that 1100. 16 by 20, 648, I'd probably make that 650. You'll find if you experiment with that a little bit, you'll see a real consistency coming through, and you'll get an idea. And then when it comes time to raise your prices, you can say, I'm going to raise my prices 10%. I'm at $18 a linear inch. So maybe you raise $2 a linear inch and see what that looks like. And you can just use it as a reference point. Some people don't like it, some people do like it. You know, I have artists who use it, I have artists who don't. But you just set the prices for the medium-sized works and then go from there. And I'm going to give you an example, which is very, very recent. This show is actually up right now. Aaron Smith is an artist that I'm working with for a long time. He was at $100 a linear inch. He's been doing spectacularly well, so we raised his prices to $110 a linear inch. So, medium-sized works in the show. 18 by 24, 18 plus 24 is 42, times 110, 4620, $4,600. A 30 by 40 piece, that's 70 inches. I know it's weird because you're not timesing it, you're adding it, but times 110, 7,700. And so on and so on. Now I'm doing a show, a 4-person show in May that Aaron's going to be in. He very rarely works small, and it's going to be like a salon style show with a lot of small work. We're going to have to figure it out. Like, it's not going to work, because once you get that small, 24 inches times 110 is $2,600. I don't think we're going to go $2,600 for a piece this small, but we'll figure that out. And then there was a piece we just priced that was 84 by 60. It's big, it's 7 feet by 5 feet, and $16,000 was too cheap. So we bumped it up a little bit. But really, unless you're talking real small or real big, linear inch can work. So I definitely recommend you guys sort of experiment with that. So those are all of my examples. Before I sort of wrap things up, does anybody have any questions? Please.
Well, is there like an etiquette? Like, say, I don't have a gallery, but let's just say I went to the gallery, you know, like, pricing to work. I have some idea, but what if I kind of don't want to get involved with it, so is it that etiquette, or the etiquette say, price it for me, sell it?
I would definitely never tell them to just price it for you, because you don't want a big surprise. They could come back with something much too high or much too low, but you can say to them, like, this is kind of what I was thinking, and I'd love some feedback. And they can let you know, like, well, our collector base tends to buy in this price range, or I think this would be appropriate, and have a conversation about it. We kind of like being asked our opinion, you know? It's like, you guys make the art, we're there to do the rest of it, so by all means, let's have a conversation about, you know, how you feel about it, and what you're thinking, and what we're thinking, and come to a determination that everyone's really comfortable with. But I wouldn't just turn it over to them. Yeah. Anybody else?
In terms of prints of, say, paintings,
Yeah.
one, would you recommend doing it? Two, if you do, how would you price it? If you price the painting?
That's a very good question. I do think, one of the nice things about this day and age is you guys have so many more options. You can sell prints on your website. You can get friends together and, you know, use your studio to do a big show. You have so many more options, which is great. And I really encourage you to do interesting and cool and different things, and to empower yourselves. Prints is one way you can do that. I know a lot of artists have a lot of success with prints. This particular painting, I made a print of with the artist. As far as prints themselves go, my feeling is do low editions. People want what they can't have. People want to feel like, oh my God, I've got to get that now. So if you've got an edition of 100, there's no sense of urgency. If you've got an edition of 30 or 40, then there's like, oh, or, you know, or even less. So I really encourage you to make the edition small. I know that that's kind of a bummer, because if it sells out, you can't do it again. But and you can price them a little bit higher if you do them smaller. The edition size is smaller. And for me, I feel like pricing prints should relate in some way to the price of the original artwork. And where that artist is. I have a friend named Jessica Adams. We did a print set with her. They're just 8 by 10 little a pair. I think the originals were like $600 each or $800 each. I apologize to Jessica if I'm getting that wrong, but they weren't super expensive. And we did the print set for $100 for the pair. And they sold like crazy. Then this print of Aaron's, this is the third print we've done of Aaron's. We've always done editions between 40 and 50. We've always priced them at $300. They've always sold out. But his original paintings, as you can see, are $7,000. So you can touch the magic, you can buy something, you know, you can have a beautiful piece of art, particularly if it's beautifully done. I definitely think quality on prints matters. You want to do good paper, make sure you're really happy with it, do a color test. But I definitely encourage it for sure. Yeah.
What about in the beginning if you're not in the gallery, extending credit or giving?
Good question. Everybody get a Square swiper for your phone, or get a PayPal account. Get a way to take money from people. Credit cards are kind of a bummer because you pay a percent, you know, you pay a fee. I would say my sort of shtick is with artists, if you know that person, you know they're good for it, and they want to write you a check, then by all means take a check from somebody. Or, you know, if it's Open Studios here and it's like a friend of the academy or whatever, I would never give anybody anything until they've paid in full. I wouldn't, because things happen. I mean, this is horrible, but I had a collector died. and we refunded the deposit to the family, we still had the piece. And then I just turned around and sold it to somebody else. But you never know, people, things happen. But I have found making it easy for people to give you money, they will. So, and absolutely, if someone's like, I really want that piece, can I give you half now and half next month? Great, give me half next month and you can pick it up. Yeah, but I wouldn't, unless it's, your sister or something like that.
Can I jump on?
Yeah.
I just want to say, it is sold through the school, though, we do process the sale.
Oh, okay.
So we do like an open studios or show by the fall, and the academy for those types of sales takes 25%. So
Okay, great, but you shouldn't price differently because
No.
they're only taking 25%. You
Right.
still price the same amount. I'm gonna take one more question and then I'm gonna wrap up.
Okay, my question was, in this market, like currently, where does drawing
I think there's always a place for drawing. I think people, pricing-wise, drawings, any works on paper, unfortunately, are gonna be priced lower. And it's kind of a bummer too because you have to frame them. You don't have to, but people like it if you do. So yeah, drawings are gonna skew a little bit less, for sure. So if you're doing paintings and drawings, you probably will have your drawings, like if you did the linear inch method, you'd skew them down a little bit.
so the linear inch will always be
It won't be the same between two different mediums. Only, yeah, consistent within the same medium, yeah.
I have the same question, so just which percentage would you like have your?
I don't know the answer to that question. I was trying to dodge that a little bit because I don't actually have a really.
10% would be okay? Or
I think the
20%?
better thing to do is to look at what would I sell this painting for and what would I sell this drawing for, count backwards, and see where they stand in relation to each other. Like, oh, the paintings are looking like they're about $20 a linear inch. This drawing, I feel like I could get this for it and this makes sense for it. And when I do the formula backwards, it's coming up at 15. I would encourage sort of starting there and seeing if you can figure it out from there. Probably more than 10% though. Probably. All right, one more and then I'm going to wrap up. Because I know people want to price stuff.
I'm sorry, this is not a price question. When you are actually ready to approach a gallery, what is the best way to go about it that's better for galleries?
The best thing to do, and that has to do with, staying curious, research. Always know what the gallery shows that you're approaching and make sure it really does feel like a good fit. Always make sure they are accepting submissions. If they are not accepting submissions, do not bother them. If they are accepting submissions and there's instructions, follow them to the letter. That is a test, FYI, inside scoop. That's a test. If you cannot apply in the way we have asked for you to apply, you are not going to be a fun person to work with because you are not reading, following instructions or being a team player or taking into consideration. Sometimes, the requests are crazy too, but always follow the instructions. And then the other thing I would say is really the best way to approach galleries is to build relationships, is to go to openings, go to shows, meet artists who are showing at other galleries, get introductions, invite somebody for a studio visit. The organic method is always the best way to do it. Referrals from friends, but by all means, if someone's accepting submissions, submit. But I do, like when I had my gallery, I showed a lot of figurative work and a lot of painting. Painting and sculpture, a little bit of photography. I'd get like the random, and I showed some abstract, but I would get something that was like so clearly not appropriate for my program, or I'd get something that was CC'd to 40 different galleries at once, and I'm like, dude, seriously? Like, just take 5 minutes, do your research, and it it reflects better on you to begin with. Okay, I'm gonna.
Thank you. How do taxes fall into all this?
That is a very good question. You guys, you got to pay taxes. You can get a lot of stuff's a write-off too. So the number one thing I'm going to say is I'm not an accountant, and you should work with an accountant. You should ask those questions. I don't know if you guys have a professional practices class that goes over taking taxes.
That's we don't. That's such a complicated.
It is.
issue. But I'll just say this informally, and maybe you'll feel the same. I don't know, but if you're selling something from your studio or something like that, you're not going to charge anybody taxes. You just keep it simple, make it easy. When Alex made a point that a lot of stuff is deductible at the end of the year, the way taxes work is you get to deduct the cost of everything that you had as expenses in making that work. So, just look at it like you'll make up for it that way. But keep it simple for the buyers.
And also, one thing to keep in mind is some artists make the decision to incorporate and become an actual business. If that happens, then you definitely, sales tax comes into play, all the rules change. And some people do make that decision. You know, I always charge sales tax. I'm a New York corporation. I'm actually changing to be a California corporation. But again, particularly on camera, I like to say, like, I'm not an accountant. Lawyer questions and accountant questions both, I'm like, you should ask a professional. Okay, so I'm going to wrap up a little bit, and I know some people want to talk about individual prices for their works.
Since we're on camera, that's what I said.
Yeah, that's what I know. Totally. Okay, pricing advice recap. Try to separate yourself emotionally. I know it's a bummer, but just try to realize that it's not personal. Start low, raise your prices as demand allows and only as demand allows. Get your work out there where people can see it. Trading, whatever it is, get your work out there. Communicate with the gallery, it's a relationship, and keep your prices consistent. And then a couple of just recapping the bonus advice. Start thinking about what you want. You don't have to have the exact same career path as everybody else in here. You just don't know how things are going to go. So be open. It's a whole big art world out there. Always be prepared. Always show your best work. Build, maintain, value your community. And then I always like to leave with never be a jerk. People remember. You will have a bad day and you will be rude to an intern who will later be the director at a really hot gallery. People remember. Even if you don't like that person, even if you really want to put that crappy thing on Facebook, just don't. Just squash it down. Do whatever you need to do. The more pleasant you are to deal with, the more you are part of a community, the more you are easy to work with, the more pleasant you are. It all comes back 1,000-fold, and you just never know who you're going to cross paths with.